And yes, also the presenters I must welcome. There's some good presentations, as you can see on the agenda, and Val will go through the agenda in a while. But also, I think what we're doing, something unique here today, is to virtualize this conference. And we've got a number of delegates and participants that are not on the campus or not at the venue here today. We are using a technology called Google Hangouts on Air. Now, Google Hangouts on Air is similar to YouTube. The only difference is it's YouTube Live. And that's quite fascinating. That means everything that we say here this morning will, after 6 seconds, it will be visible on YouTube. And that's fascinating. And we've got the full support for that through from, we've got a company called Grove, who are the solution providers for Google applications in higher education that has implemented this. Luckily, the bandwidth at this venue is good enough. So we're streaming that out to the rest of the world. And all the presentations, even my talk, will be visible on YouTube after the event. So welcome also to all those participants that are not here but are virtually participating. And I'm sure the YouTube would also be shared within the institutions in South Africa and be part of that change management process for the adoption of Kuali. But before I carry on, I get so enthusiastic about the whole Kuali that Jan asked me, please, Helmi, be disciplined and stay within your time. So I have to do that. But before I hand over to Ati to do the presentations or introductions into the next speakers, I want to introduce you to Val. Val, if you can come forward. Valtron is the General Manager of As Audit. And I must say that everything I forget, she remembers, and therefore I treat her very dearly. And thank you for Val for your being the project manager for this whole event. And I don't know I didn't realize the complexity that is necessary in arranging such an event. And up to now, nothing has gone wrong. Nothing has gone wrong. Thank you, Val.
Thank you, Helmi, and let me just touch some wood before something does go wrong. It's absolutely wonderful to be here today, and I welcome you from our side, those that have flown over the ocean, those that have flown in the country, and also those that have had to fly through the R300's traffic and the N2's traffic to get here this morning. So very, very welcome. It's wonderful to see some of my very old colleagues, not old, long-standing colleagues in the audience. It's very, very nice to see you all again. And it's also very nice to see the new faces here, and I look forward to speaking to you and getting to know you a little bit better on this conference. For our international guests, if there's anything we can do to make you feel more welcome in South Africa, you just need to let me know. And if anybody has any problems during the conference, I'm here to help. Please just catch me somewhere. I'll be around the whole conference. Just in terms of logistics, I just want to point out that this is the plenary session, but it will become 2 rooms. So on your program, when you see Somerset 1 and Somerset 2, this is Somerset 1, that's Somerset 2. But for today, we are going to be in a plenary the whole day. So we've got this big event, this big venue for the whole of the day. Then we've also got 4 breakout rooms. 3 of them are just opposite us, and 1 is towards the lobby. The one that will be used today, called Amsterdam, is the one around the lobby. If you want to use meeting rooms at any stage, please just give me a shout, and if it's not booked, then I'll arrange that for you with pleasure. I'm sure that most of you found out that we have Wi-Fi here, and the Wi-Fi is simply the hotel's name. The one that says lobby is connecting you to the lobby, but it's best not to use that one because it's got very poor bandwidth. You are limited, unfortunately, to 100 meg per day. So if you need more bandwidth, please just move to the lobby. That's free and unlimited. We will be streaming this, as Helmi said, so we are going to be very strict on time management for those folks that are joining us in the Google Hangouts. So please bear with us. We will have to keep on track to make that a success for them as well. Today we've got teas mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and our lunch will be in the Pavilion Restaurant. This evening we will also be in the Pavilion Restaurant for our gala event. And then, if you don't mind, we'd like to take a group photo just outside the conference area here, and the photographer will be here just before lunch. So I think I've covered everything. Thank you very much. Enjoy your conference, and over to Ati. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. I think that clearly spelled out what's the next steps and where your responsibilities are, mostly in networking and listening. If I can call then on Ati to welcome the next speaker. As I said, Ati has been very instrumental in many of the Kuali events in South Africa, similarly in this event, and I then say thank you very much, Ati.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think I've shaken most of your hands already. It's a privilege for me to have so many people here today. We've been working hard at Kuali for the past few years, and the disease is spreading slowly. So I'm very glad to see you here. It's my pleasure to welcome especially Jennifer Fouty. She's the Executive Director of the Kuali Foundation. She will introduce herself further and what that means, what she manages. But most of you know that the Kuali organization is in the form of a foundation, American foundation, controlling and governing most of our activities, looking after all the projects and all the community involvement, and that's a very, very big job. We sometimes pull in different directions. We have to be coordinated. That's not so easy. It's like herding cats. So Jennifer, please welcome.
Thank you, Addie, for that nice welcome. I am so pleased to be here. It's amazing to think that just a few years ago, when Kuali was getting started, by just a couple of schools in the U.S., thinking all we would do would be a financial system through this open source or community source methodology. And to be standing here just a few years later, looking at all of you, looking at the number of institutions we have here today, and the spread of the disease, as Adi says, to this gorgeous country, is just it's for myself, who's very passionate about Kuali, as I'm learning that many of you are as well, it's just incredibly meaningful. And to fly from very cold and gray Chicago to your beautiful country, I was struck, since it's my first time here, I was struck not only by the beautiful weather, because it's such a contrast, but your scenery, and I can't wait for a few of the trips I'm going to be taking in the next couple of days after the conference is over, but the hospitality, all of the friendly faces, the smiling and warm welcome that I have received. One of my colleagues, so I have to use this phrase, one of my colleagues said, a ruthless hospitality, because it's just so intense. So thank you all for your very warm welcome. And I was thinking about, the organization that that you've put together here for this Kuali Days conference. The Kuali Days conferences we've had at San Diego last year and Austin the year before, where I met for the first time many of you in Austin. That we have about 900 attendees at those Kuali Days, and I'm thinking to myself, here we are in South Africa, where you're still in the evolution phase of coming to the Kuali community, and already we're at, what is it, a little over 100. So for that kind of attendance, I think it just is telling, and it says a lot about your beginning and growing commitment to the Kuali Foundation. As Addie said, I am the executive director of the Kuali Foundation, and since it is a very large organization, at any given time there's about 1,500 to 1,800 individuals throughout the US, Canada, UK, and of course now South Africa. At any given time, there's approximately that many people working on the various aspects of the 8 different projects we have going on. And doing it in this virtual way, which technology now allows us to do, but still is very challenging. So, you know, I'm looking at a lot of the Open Collab people and some of the other SMEs that I'm getting to know here. And the fact that we're able to do this across not only a country, but across oceans is really tremendous. So I thank all of you for how you're beginning to use the technology and use this collaboration to do such great work. I'm not going to say any more, except that I really hope to meet each of you individually. Since this is an intimate venue, please seek me out, introduce yourself, let me know who you are, let me know how you're working with the Kuali community. This is my one chance to really get to know not only South Africa, each of your universities, what your plans are, who you are, what your passion is, both about Kuali and elsewhere. So please seek me out and let's talk during breaks. So without further ado, I'll let you all get on with your conference, and thanks again for having me here in South Africa.
The next speaker, no, I'm not sure. Brad, okay. Brad, thank you very much. Brad Wheeler is as I said, the chair of the Kuali Foundation, and being very much of a instrumental of the implementation of community source software at Indiana University as well. So Brad, thank you for being here, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm going to phone tech. There we go. There we go. I think you better take that one away. Very good. What a pleasure to be here. I'll open with a short story. I had the good pleasure to come to South Africa twice in 2001. I came down here for work, and they worked me to death on a particular corporate assignment, and I immediately went back and booked a vacation holiday to return to South Africa. Had a wonderful time, so taken with the idea that I wanted to, I had just gone through promotion and tenure at the university as a business school professor, and I had a sabbatical coming, one of those things that academics get to do occasionally, or so it's rumored. So I wanted to do my sabbatical and come back to South Africa and do some work here with one of the universities, or possibly one of the, the NGOs or something. But before I could get that arranged, in the summer of 2001, I got a career interruption of being pulled into university administration quite unexpectedly. So it was a part-time gig for only 3 years to be the Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning IT for the university. Well, in the next 6 years, I had 5 different jobs working for a very highly accomplished Australian who ultimately became president, and I became vice president for our IT, and thus it took me about 13 years to get back down to South Africa. But it's really good to be with you again. So I want to really focus on the challenges of higher education today. I want to tell you a lot about Kuali and what we're doing. But in my job as a vice president for Indiana University, we're really facing a fundamental restructuring of higher education in the United States. Public support for higher ed is trending down, down, down. I wish I would have thought I could have shown you a chart, but you can imagine it's going down like this. And thus, the cost of running the university is being passed directly to students, who are often financing that with more student loans. So you have student debt accumulating at a very, very high rate. So it is really, really incumbent upon the leadership of the university to try to figure out how to make education better and how to make it cost less. So 2 big challenges for us, amongst many, but just 2 I'll address here today, is 1, how will we pay for these essential big software systems. And they are essential. We have to be able to register students. We have to be able to pass audit for public integrity in the management of our finances. We have to manage our personnel in HR matters, in research, in contracts, and grants. So how will we pay for these things going forward? And the second is, how will we resolve the inevitable conflicts that we've learned when at least two people get together, or particularly a buyer and a seller get together? Everything else that we have to say is framed in these two lenses. So why do these darn things cost so much money? Now, I didn't put all the numbers up there that I could have, but those are just a few fresh ones for your eyes. $83.5 million US to upgrade a big software system at one university. That's a public record. I'm not making that number up. $83.5 million. Another one signed a deal for 60, and I'll laugh because there is no way that is going to close at 60. Watch for triple digits coming soon to a university near you. One I cannot name, let's just say the meter spun by 300 million and there's no end in sight for this. Now, isn't this just absolutely amazing? I have the 6, not 23 up there because that's the Indiana University story. The quote for us to put in a big vended financial system, we had already put in student, we had already put in the HR system, because that's what was really available in the day. There was no Kuali. Those were the choices that we had, and we had some pretty eye-popping numbers doing that ourselves. So the quote was $23 million to put that next one in for financial, and in 23, you know, in ERP speak, that's how we say 30-ish by the time you probably get it put in. But really, to Barry Walsh's credit, Barry truly laid down on the train tracks and stopped the locomotive and said, we can do this differently. And all in, Indiana University was the largest investor in the creation of the Kuali financial system. Through our work with many partners and our implementation, we're in for less than $6 million. And so I can say to our deans and to my provost, we left at least $17 million in your mission for you to spend on research, for you to spend on student scholarships, for classrooms and such. At Indiana University, our trustees remind us from time to time, the undergraduate in-state, resident of the state of Indiana, the tuition is about $10,400 US per year. So in rough numbers, every $1 million that we avoid in administrative cost is equivalent to 100 students having tuition for a full year without accumulating student debt, or 25 students having a full 4 years of tuition. So when you take that figure and then you look at $83 million or $300 million, these are not just amusing journal entries and purchase orders that go by and a salesman getting a big commission because he signed a deal with you. That's money that came out of your mission. And that's what we're about, is trying to help keep that money in your mission. So let's take a little bit of a history lesson here. Around 2002, we had just survived the millennium, and a lot of big ERP software systems were going in. Kavavic and Katz published a study at EDUCAUSE, and this is a quote from it. They said, at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st, higher education has invested, by a conservative estimate, $5 billion US in administrative and enterprise resource planning systems. ERP, 3 letters that represent the tremendous time, energy, and money consumed by hundreds of institutions over the past decade. Most folks now looking back at that and said, $5 billion? Wow, I could almost add that up in my head just going through the news announcements of these things. So we became conditioned with quotes that looked like this. I had to hide the identity, so this is a silhouette of provost at big university. Yes, $30 million, but that's just how much these things cost. We've become conditioned not to question if things could be done differently. But that's the question that we asked. And again, Barry deserves tremendous credit. So 10 years ago this month, the word Kuali had not been uttered anywhere other than in Malaysia when they were talking about cooking and getting a wok. That's what it actually means. We did not have a name for this thing. There was something mumbling around called the Open Source Financial Information System. The NACUBO, which is the Finance Directors Club in the United States, NACUBO was doing a study and said, well, if you pick that financial system for the design, would it work for a big, complex university? Would it work for a small college or university? Would it work for a multi-campus? Would it work for a public institution? Would it work for a private university? And in April, NACUBO came back and said, yes, the design you have chosen is flexible enough to accommodate all of those different kinds of universities. And we were tussling to clear up some intellectual property concerns and designs. And so by July of 2004, we said, we can do this. We can do this differently. So in a vaporware announcement that would have made IBM blush in the day, on August 30th of 2004, here it is from the Chronicle of Higher Ed. Frustrated with the high cost of commercial financial management software, Indiana University and the University of Hawaii are leading an effort to build a free open source alternative. Nobody had done this. Most people thought nobody's going to do this or that this wouldn't work. Universities, I mean, can we really pull something like this off together? And if you read further in the article, I should note RSmart was also a co-founder and NACUBO, the financial organization. There were 4 of us listed as co-founders on that day. Now, I say a vaporware announcement, not because I'm a slick salesman and I'm just selling snake oil, but because we bet on the possibility. We bet on us being smart enough that we would want to keep our money in our mission. And if we mobilized an idea, some other universities would come forward as well. So by March of 2005, Cornell University, Michigan State University, obviously Indiana, the University of Arizona, the University of Hawaii, and San Joaquin Delta Community College, a 2-year school in California, all came together with a little bit of money from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and off we went. So where are we today? Fast forward 10 years. Well, first off, we're in South Africa, and that's pretty awesome that we've got things going on down here and a number of institutions saying, we think that's a good idea, and we're really glad you guys have worked some of the bugs out of it. Now we're in, and we're going to help you work the bugs out of the newer projects too. The Kuali Foundation, which Jennifer so ably leads, 77 members, 8 different projects, 12 commercial affiliates. The commercial firms I'll speak to later, they provide support and implementation assistance if needed. Around $19 million US in our annual spend from the Kuali Foundation and $28 million in net assets. All from a paragraph saying, we think we should do this together. And because we are doing it together, here we are 10 years later. Now, some people think, wow, this is a radical new idea. I mean, not buying big, expensive vended software and like sharing code with each other and thinking about if you debits on the left, credits on the right. I mean, do we all agree? And what I really have to just hammer home is, no, this isn't new. We're just waking up from some bad scenario. This is how we work. As a researcher, as a faculty member, if I have a clever idea and I do a study and I write it up and then I put it in my file cabinet and nobody ever reads it, I don't get promoted or tenured. Eventually you get fired at Indiana University. So academics, we share. When we write things, we build on a cumulative stream of research. The guy who published a paper before, I question that, I run a study, I show that's a little bit different, someone else questions what I said, and it's a cumulative nature of research, and it's made possible by sharing. Look at medical research. The progress we have in medical research is because we share. Now, certainly there are firms, big pharma, they patent things and they invest and they do a lot of wonderful things. But at its bedrock, it is built on sharing and a cumulative discipline. Likewise in teaching and learning materials. The whole textbook industry has been built around faculty sharing ideas. Some of it's now being shared as open educational resources. So I want to drive this point home. Sharing software amongst universities, particularly for computer scientists and others who wrote codes, and even today, we share. So all we're simply doing here is enabling people who run the university in an administrative capacity to do what academics have always done. This is in our nature. So please understand, we're just getting back to normal here. We're not doing something really crazy. Now, how did that $5 billion journey happen, and what does that mean for the future and where we're going? Well, if you back up to the systems of the 70s and 80s, most of us, we had to build our own software. We had a few programmers, you know, hacked out a little COBOL, maybe a little Fortran. We wrote a little assembler for some of us. You know, we hacked out a financial system, an enrollment system, and, you know, fingers crossed, some of those still got up and worked this morning. They may not tomorrow, but they're still out there working today. And so we built this stuff. Well, through the 1990s, it came along, this notion of the core competencies of the firm. And in the United States context, it was, you're a university. Stop building software. Go buy that stuff. Focus on your core business. Well, that didn't make a lot of sense if you could go buy that stuff at prices that were real simple. I mean, few of you, I doubt, make your own paper. You probably, when you need printer paper, buy it from an office supply store. Okay, and there's a very competitive market for that, and it's a very efficient thing to do. But in big system software, that's not the situation that we have. So we spent about $5 billion here in the middle, and the question arises now, what happens next? Many of those systems that went in the late 90s and early 2000s are coming of age and a bit overdue to be replaced. Some folks did not do the buy software in the last round. They're still on systems that they built that have served them well and have been economically efficient, but they're at the end of life, and they've got to do something now. So how will we pay for this third round? Is it going to be another $5 billion, or by more honest accounting in the U.S., probably $7 or $8 billion? The money is not there. Money's not there in the U.S. context anymore. So what will we do differently? And then we have this thing called the cloud on the horizon, and my cloud got a little word wrapped there. But we have the cloud on the horizon, and people going, oh, wow, you know, the world has changed. Everything's all new. We're getting all cloudy here. You know, I say, you know, step back and let's think about this. I had a very good CIO explain to me one time. He said, well, you know, we used to have to build that stuff, and then the big ERPs came along, and then we bought it. And then you guys started this open source Kuali thing, and we thought that was going to be cool. But now we're doing cloud. This is the fourth evolution of this. And I said, whoa, time out here. We have a foul. Let's have a tutorial moment. So you have to think about rights and provisioning here, because you're conflating two very different things. So on one hand, we could say on the vertical axis, do you own the software? And if you wrote that software yourself, you own it. You have the rights to it. You can change it. You can modify it. You can share it with friends. You can take it home at night if you wish. It is all your software to do as you wish. And you run it yourself. It is your responsibility. If it goes off in the middle of the night, you can get out of bed and go fix it, because it is your responsibility and you run it on premises at your institution. So that's our homegrown. Kuali can be installed that way, systems that you've built. The second model, and the one that really took hold over the last 15 years, is that we don't own the software. So we buy it from a large company, and we download it, and we install it, and we pay a lot of money to put it in, and then we have to license it. and it's usually metered in some way. You buy it for so many students or for so many staff. But if you go up, you have to pay more for it. Now, you can imagine the surge in cost at the software company if you add 3 students. Yeah, I mean, it just knocks them over. But obviously, it has no cost to them. But I can tell you, at Indiana University, since the financial recession in 2009, enrollment has gone up, headcount at the university has gone up in some ways. We've paid over $1 million in exceptional cost for triggering licensing numbers. What was the cost of the software company during that period? 0. That was 100 student scholarships that left the university for no material extra cost anywhere else. This is where the $5 billion went. The model is flawed relative to our interests. Now comes along the cloud, and it says, no, rather than you having to run that software, we will put it in a big data center somewhere, and we'll use this fancy thing called the internet, if you've got good connectivity, and you can just run it, we'll manage it, and you pay for it each time you use it. So it's the same licensing model. It is metered. You do not own the software. You cannot take it home and sleep under your pillow with it at night. Modifying it, good luck with that, because it's in their data center. You can write all sorts of ancillary connections and open APIs to them until they change it and break every one of those. So you have no rights in this model, and this model is just sweeping the administrative mindset right now. But there actually is a 4th option that a lot of people aren't thinking about. Why can't you go off-site, host it at someone else's data center, you pay them to manage it, not your worry, but it's still open source software. You still own the code. So if they misbehave in pricing or get sloppy, they cannot take that software away from you. You could pick a different vendor to host that software for you or bring it back inside. I think it's really important to unpack cloud and not get cloud thinking it's the Messiah coming in some way, because even The Economist magazine, which I think is brilliant, about 3 years ago wrote, beware the cloud. It is the next form of vendor lock-in. Nobody went into their ERP contracts in the late 90s or the early 2000s going, wow, I just can't wait to feel screwed over in a few years. And people say, hey, you just need to negotiate harder. These firms, and they are doing their job. I'm not bashing the firms because, look, I'm a business school, I'm a capitalist guy. They are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's what their job is to make our money their money. My job is to make our money, stay our money. And so, I wish you luck out lawyering them. They've got buildings that have floors of lawyers. And I'm sure your general counsel's really good, and you can even get Gartner or somebody to come help you. But good luck with that over time. We've got a decade plus of experience. So it would be naive to believe that the next decade is going to be radically different if we don't think a little bit deeper. So manage by contracts, and that's my good luck with your lawyering, or our ball, our rules. So Kuali 101. Let me give a quick tutorial. Some of you know a lot about Kuali, and perhaps some of you know a little bit less. So if you'll indulge me a little bit, if some of this seems first base kinds of things, I want to make sure we don't skip over things that are important in what makes this whole thing work. So do you use the term 101? We would say the intro class is the 101. Okay, so here we are, 101. You'll get a badge for this at the end of the class. That is if you're paying attention, and I can see who's not. So open source licensing. That is one of the hallmarks of what we do, is the work can be shared. We use an approved open source license. There's a group in the United States at opensource.org. They keep a list of the approved licenses, not the ones that are shady and sort of open, but the open source licenses that are out there. And in that, there are software producers. So IU is a software producer. We have bought some things, but we have the ability to write things to meet our needs. We have several of our team here today. Audie in his shop, he has built a capacity to be a software producer. But there are far more software consumers out there. So institutions who do not manage a group of developers and have chosen to buy things and license them. Both are completely valid models, both can be successful, and they actually work together. And by definition, everyone who is a software producer is also a software consumer. And the third element of this is commercial support. Because when Kuali was started, one of the things about universities, if we share some software with each other, I can share my code to you, it doesn't cost me anything, and that's really good. The problem is, you may call me and want support. And if you're my friend, that's really a problem because you will call me a lot wanting support. So it's really good to have commercial firms available that when it gets beyond kind of the friends and family chat, we actually have a firm that provides support and implementation assistance for that. So these are the three pieces about making our ecosystem work. So a lot of text here, but we have a few things that are pretty important in how we have built Kuali in its first decade. And that is, the money goes into the projects. So when an institution invests in the financial system or the research administration system, it's not going into some big something in the sky. The money is going into that project, into the financial project or the library project. We use common licensing. So when the librarians came on board, I had no idea a library administration system has a whole financial system in it. You'd think they'd just use the one the university has, but for some reasons they don't in many cases. So they just took a big chunk of the financial system, Kuali Financial, and just put it in the library system and reused it. And that was effortless because the license allowed for that to happen. We work with projects that have a charter and a governance. We are very careful in managing the money. Jennifer is very studious in that. It's all audited, public record audits and look at it. And we had an open membership for commercial entities or for universities. And this is an important point. When Kuali was started, it was kind of like what we would call, a shelter dog, dogs that have been picked up and maybe have had an abusive relationship, and you reach down to pet a shelter dog and they don't know if you're going to hit them or not. Some universities were a little bit kind of like a shelter dog coming out of a commercial relationship, and they wanted to say, no commercial firms, only universities. And we said, no, that's not the kind of world we're trying to build. There's some things that commercial firms can do well, and there's some things that universities do well. We just want to end the practices that are not helpful, that take advantage of us, amplify switching costs and then make it more expensive. So we are blended with both commercial and universities. But it's important to note, when commercial firms invest in improving the Kuali software, with some exceptions, but almost always they are contributing that code back into the open source code base. So this is really something that is an ecosystem that works for all of us. Some of you know of Eric Raymond's famous book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. If you haven't read it, it's a wonderful little book. It's a very short story, and he tells the story about how software is made. And on one hand, it could be a big firm like Oracle or Microsoft or Adobe, and they're the cathedral. It's a top-down management structure, and this is how software is made. Then the open source software model with Linux or Apache came along, and it was more like the market. It was more like the bazaar, haggling and yelling, my code's better than yours. No, your code is atrocious. No, but my code works. And, working out this food fight of code. Now, each of these have their merits. The bazaar provides a means for, oh, thank you very much. The bazaar provides a means for lots of ideas to get in, and an idea has to survive on its own merits. If I'm walking through the market and thinking about buying bananas, they can't impose their bananas on me. and they can't take my money. You know, we will come to terms of whether I think their bananas are fit for my consumption or not, and the price is appropriate. So each of these has merits. The nice thing, though, about the cathedral is it's more planned. There's a project. Release 1 will happen on this date. We will make trade-offs. It marches along. You know what's going to happen. In the bazaar, open source, hey, the software will be done when it's done. You should plan accordingly. And so that's one of the challenges that open source has with merits. So we thought, you know, what we really need is, for big administrative systems, we need a little of both. We want the merits of the bazaar, but we need a little bit of the structure of the cathedral. So while our software licensing is open source, just like any of these other projects out there, we use the term community source. And so somewhere between, you know, the bazaar and the cathedral, that's where the pub is, and that's where, you know, most of the real business gets done in a village anyway. So community source. So now, how does the Kuali Foundation Board get together, and how do we decide that we are going to start a library project, and we decide a library project is more important than an HR project, or more important than something with the student system? That's really simple. Kuali Foundation doesn't. We don't do that. In our first decade, all of this has been built because it comes from you. The foundation coordinates the work and the ideas of universities. So where do little Kuali projects come from? Here's the story of how Kuali projects come about. In general, there's a common need identified. So when Barry was at Indiana University and in the financial area, he saw we needed to replace our financial system. The old homegrown one was going to become technically obsolete. We had to do something. He began talking to others who had a similar need. And so saying, well, are we talking about the same thing? Yeah, I think that's what we want. We want a, you know, fund-based accounting system and such. So lots of these discussions happen. And you have a lot of people talk, oh yeah, I'm sort of maybe possibly interested in, could do that. And so it's kind of, well, are you in? I don't know. Are you in? Well, I don't, you know, I can't commit, you know. And so there's this discussion going on. But there really becomes a time when you spell it out. This is the design of the system we're going to do. This is the goal. These are the timelines. This is how much money it's going to take to do this. This is how we would make decisions together. And you see that big red line? It's kind of, are you in or are you out? Because in the Kuali projects, we follow that long time tested principle of the golden rule. You bring the gold, you make the rules. And so it's really important to know who the investors are. Because we learned early in some other software projects that if I'm supplying resources from Indiana University and another university is really putting any resources in, but they want to have a veto on all the decisions and trade-offs, that does not work well. And so that's why investors in projects help steer the decisions. So the project gets started, a board, functional users, the technical team. These are functionally driven projects. A group of financial people for KFS. I mean, some people did not believe a private university like Cornell, a multi-campus university like IU, a big public one, San Joaquin Delta Community College, that we could have ever agreed functionally on how a financial system should work. But we did, and you know what? Our functional people got a lot smarter through that process by having to live with each other and realize, oh, I guess that we thought that was a requirement, but you're right, we are nuts. We don't have to do it that way. We should do it your way, because that would be a whole lot simpler. And obviously then the project gets built, they are enhanced, more investors come along, more software consumers come along, and the projects grow over time. Now you might say, well, what happens when the investment runs out? So for the original financial system, IU came in with an investment in Michigan State and Cornell and the Mellon Foundation. But now that that money is gone, the KFS, the financial project, has 11, is that correct? 11 sustaining investors They're paying in roughly $100,000 a year or a person. There's a couple of different levels you can join at. They have a seat at the board. They can prioritize the next features, sets, and they steer how that project goes along. Now ask yourself, why would a university pay in $100,000 a year for freely downloadable software? Well, first, that's cheaper than their alternatives. They could go to a commercial market, but that is less expensive for a big university than what their maintenance contracts would otherwise be. Two, they get to prioritize what happens next. Now, could they choose to stop doing that? Yes, they could. What if everybody chose to stop doing that? Well, pretty soon everybody would be back together because financial statements have to get updated every so often. So it is economically rational to continue in that way. Barry is one who's also driven this with the functional councils because it's really simple. When functional users start thinking about the software they want it all, they want it right, and they want it now. And they can have two of those, as you know from anyone who's managed a project before. If you want the scope to be this big and you want it right now, give me your wallet, because that's how much it will cost. If you know how much your resources are and you know what your time, that it's got to be ready in 1 year, okay, this is how much software you get in that amount of time. Learning this discipline is part of what enables us to work together. Because if you don't have the discipline, you could have people just arguing about things all the time. And some ask, you know, well, what's the secret sauce? Kuali's been going now for 10 years. It's strong. It's growing. A lot of times some of these projects have faltered. What makes this work? And I think that what makes it work is some fairly lightweight coordination and this balance. So at Indiana, we could right now, if we thought y'all all were crazy, we could just go fork that software, pull it back to IU, and turn off email and just be by ourselves. It is severable. We can walk away with it. You can walk away with it and use it. Open Collab can take that software and use it and sell it in a cloud service if they wish to do so. We designed this decade to be able to do that. Now, at IU, the reason we don't do that is because it would be an ignorant thing to do. Because then we would have to maintain it all by ourselves. And we would not get the benefit when Michigan State writes some clever new features that get folded in, and then we get those for free. So it's this natural tension. It holds us together, but yet we're not trapped. If we wanted to walk away, the Kuali Foundation can't say, oh, your student count went up. You have to pay us $1 million more this year. It doesn't work that way. This lightweight tension, I think, is part of what makes it all work together. So I've used some vocabulary, and let me make sure everyone understands. The foundation is the legal entity, and within the foundation there are the projects. Barry is following me this morning, and he's going to explain each of the projects to you, so I'm not going to spend much time on that, but that's our distinction between the foundation and the projects. Now, the foundation provides an umbrella that provides services. Imagine if, well, this is exactly how it happened. The librarians wanted to build a new library management system because they felt they'd had a similar experience. There was just a couple of vendors. They weren't happy with how that was going for them, and they wanted to chart their own direction. And they talked to the Kuali Foundation, and they said, no, we're just going to go off and do this by ourselves. So they studied it for about a year. They did some analysis. They talked to the Mellon Foundation, and they came back and said, you know, y'all look pretty good after all. So the librarians they took their project, and it became a Kuali project. Now, they accepted a few things, and they got a few things. They got all of these services that you see listed here from the foundation: legal, accounting, a brand. It's not the, crazy new library system. It's the Kuali library system, and that raises some eyebrows and legitimizes it some just by being associated with the brand. They didn't have to figure out how to do all this stuff. We had already done it with financial, with research administration, with RISE. Student project was spinning up about that time. So we learned how to do some things. But the foundation also is very flexible with the projects. The librarian said, we do not have software developers. We have a few, but we don't want to write this ourselves. So they put together the specifications of what they wanted. We had a competitive bid, and one of Kuali's commercial firms, commercial affiliate called HTC, won a competitive bid to do the software development. A good chunk of it's being done in India, some of it's being done onshore. The relationship has worked fantastically, and it's fully our code. That firm has no particular rights to it. So the foundation provides a lot of services for the projects. The foundation, people are amazed when I say it's a $19 million a year U.S. in spend and $30 million in net assets, and they go, oh my gosh, where are all your people? And we say, well, all 5 of them are, they're not all in Indiana, they're located in a few places. But you can see it's a very lightweight organization because the projects do a lot of their own coordinating work. These 5 staff provide the services that you saw there a moment ago. And this is very simple. We're keeping your money in your mission. There is no sales force. Sometimes people want to know, well, can I get a sales call from Kuali? Can someone come out and do a sales call for me? No, we don't have a sales force. We are a community. We talk to each other, and the commercial firms will come out and do that function. But this is the whole of the foundation. So now, why would somebody become a member of the foundation, and what does that mean? So to become a member of the Kuali Foundation, if I speak in U.S. terms, we started the organization and we said, okay, a big university like Indiana, it's got about a $3 billion a year annual budget for 8 campuses. You're going to pay $25,000 a year just to be a member. The software's free. You can get the software without being a member, but just to make everything work in some of that organization, $25,000 a year. For a very small college or school, it might be $5,000 a year. And that was our scale, and we stuck with this for a long time. We're going to raise those rates a little bit. We have not changed them since 2006. So we're going to raise those a little bit. And I think Audie has worked out some arrangements for pricing in South Africa that are better for your currency exchange rates and such. But we had a lot of people say yes. I've given up on trying to update this slide. It's just impossible. But there's about 70 colleges and universities who have chosen to be members of the foundation, and obviously a growing roster here in South Africa as well. Second, I mentioned commercial firms. So why would a commercial firm become a dues-paying member? They pay membership dues just like the universities. Well, many participate in the community, and I got to say, they really, really participate in the community. Those of you who've worked on Kuali, you'll know on a listserv, a message will go out and someone saying, we're having a problem with something, and we're running on Linux version 12.9.4 and Apache version 8.3.2, and it's on some old Sun hardware. First people would ask, you've got to be kidding. You still have Sun hardware working? And then the next response would be, oh yeah, we had that problem once before. Here's what you got to do. You got to install this patch first, and then do that one, and then reboot, and you're good. The commercial firms will often answer those questions on the listservs, just like colleges and university members do as well. So I really want to drive this point home. They have been really good members of the community. Likewise, if you want installation services or migration from your old system to your new system, that's what the commercial firms do. So you have Open Collab here in South Africa providing those services. Some of these firms have a global footprint. Others are local to the United States. And some of them specialize just in one part of what Kuali does. Polis, for example, they work in the research administration area. Kuali COIAS, that's their area of specialty expertise. But this is an unbundling that has enabled you to decide if you want to support the software yourself and working in the community, or if you want to contract with one of the commercial firms for that support. Now, if you've been listening closely, you will notice several times I dropped the word in our first decade. These are the choices we've made in our first decade. The foundation now, we look and think a lot about our next decade. Firms go through cycles. Things that help them succeed in their first decade, they have to rethink their second one. So in a harsh analogy, I don't know if you know of a US company called Blockbuster or not. Blockbuster was the video rental store, and they became like a petrol station. I mean, they were everywhere, and you know, for a couple of decades they ran fine from videotape, and then they embraced that radical innovation of going from videotape to DVD, where people still came to their store, and then even Blu-ray. But they completely missed the transition to on-demand, and they are now bankrupt and gone. And they got their rear ends kicked by a firm called Netflix along the way. So the foundation, we realize our universities are evolving, and we want to make sure that the Kuali Foundation continues to evolve too. So we have a lot of thinking that we're doing about how do we take all the things that are working for colleges and universities and have helped us succeed, apply those lessons to a world that's continuing to change. And I just want to signal this, that we're very mindful of what helped us succeed in one decade. We want to take all that that's good, and we want to bring it forward to the next decade. Clearly, one of the options that I mentioned earlier is increasingly, some of us may not want to run software in our data centers. If network connectivity is huge and abundant, we may choose to aggregate some things together. In the state of Indiana, we have legally separate entities: Purdue University, Ball State University, the Community College of Indiana, Ivy Tech Community College, and a number of those, we have aggregated services together in one data center that we run in Indiana. There are some things for personal file storage for students and faculty and staff. We cut a deal through Internet 2, something called Box. There's a company called Box.com, and we've outsourced that to Box.com, and we're not running that storage locally anymore. So it's important that as we all continue to think about how Kuali goes forward, we're thinking about the future there as well. So one of the things that we've learned is we've been saving too much of your money. I really mean that. We have been too cheap, and Jennifer is abundantly frugal on these matters. But we didn't want to spend money on marketing because it was spreading by word of mouth. We know each other. But what we've learned is the arguments of, this is Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, a brilliant book, and it talks about how do new adoptions of things happen. And so we're in that early innovators category. And the arguments that you've heard, they appeal to the investors. They have appealed to some of the software consumers. We have many institutions that have never invested in a Kuali project. They became a member of the Kuali Foundation. They download and use the software, or a commercial firm helps them install it, and they've never written a line of code themselves. So the arguments that have appealed to the innovators are the ones that got us to here. But now we have to find the messages that appeal to the early adopters and the early majority. And we're learning how to express that in marketing and communications. So one part of our marketing now is just getting brass tacks with what we know and have proven to be true. Keep your money in your mission. Kuali costs less. Now, that was not a proven point in the early days. And some say, oh, the licensing costs not so much. You know, it's really installing software and migration. That's where you spend all that big money on an ERP. Well, we have the data RN now. It costs less to put Kuali in. It costs less to support and maintain Kuali as you go along. Now, your institution can do crazy things. You can make it cost more if you are sloppy in what you do. With your own effort, you can achieve it. But if you will pay attention and work the community and adopt the best practices that we learned along the way, you can save a lot of money for your mission. And we've been driving a little bit of advertising in some of the magazines where financial officers read, or research administration officers, or librarians. And so here are two of the first ads. These are Kuali Choice, and essentially Colorado State University saves millions by choosing Kuali, and then it gives some reasons and it lists their chief financial officer. And Indiana University saves millions. And I'm pleased to say that it's not that there's not one person who can make a decision at IU and it took a group, though that could be true. This is a group that shows how fully IU has bought into this. This is our librarian, our chief financial officer, our director of purchasing, the vice president for research administration, the vice provost and dean of faculty, and even the CIO back there in the back. Likewise, Northwest University has adopted the same theme, and this ad is available to you here and is going out other places as well. We're driving the message because it's clearly the point. Keep your money in your mission. Make these choices because we're getting back to the values of higher education. We are a sharing culture by our nature. There's also been a thought about Kuali of, well, unless you're going all in on a system, you don't really do anything yet. But we've been discussing Kuali now. So maybe you're not ready to change out your HR system, but for recording time and attendance, you need a timekeeping system. So Kuali has a Kuali timekeeping system, and IU just went live with it for all, our 15,000 faculty and staff about 2 weeks ago. And that will bolt on to your vended system or your homegrown system. For our student system at IU, we have Oracle PeopleSoft is our student system. Some of the features of that are not quite as elegant as the students might like when they compare that to their Amazon experience or Facebook experience. So some software for Kuali student with the University of Washington, where Bill is here somewhere, Bill Yock, there's Bill. They wrote, they called it My Plan for students to lay out their courses and plan their courses. IU needed something like that. So rather than do that ourselves, we reached up and got My Plan from the University of Washington. It's being part of the early stages of Kuali Student, and our team took it and implemented it at IU in 6 months. And that is amazing. Lori Sullivan is in the back. Her team led that, and we turned it on, and students are building their academic plan. Which courses, which semester, what's the availability? Because one of the chief determinants of student debt is how many semesters were you at the university. So if you reduce those extra semesters because somebody didn't get a class they needed to graduate, you help reduce the cost of a university degree. My plan, or Kuali Student Academic Plan, or KSAP as it's called now, that is a means of doing this. So taking parts of Kuali and bolting it on to systems that you have now is another immediate path. Another trend with Kuali is saying we have funded each of these projects separately. The librarians raise their own money and they're building the library system, and they do not want the CFOs running off with their money. And the research administration people, and likewise the student. But the Kuali Foundation, increasingly, we need to look across the whole suite of projects. Portfolio, because if we're running several of those at Indiana University or University of Stellenbosch puts in multiple pieces of Kuali, they would like the user interface to be more seamless and work the same way across those. And how can we really squeeze some economy of scale and efficiency about doing this? So one of the earliest examples of our work across the entire portfolio is the User Experience Initiative, UXI. So the investors in Kuali, many of the universities, said, we'll put in a little more money and let's have a special pot that works to improve the user interface across a number of Kuali projects. So the UXI initiative, here you see, seeks to create delightful interactions between users and systems, and we want them to be intuitive and so that a novice user, so for example, in research administration, you have people who work in the contracts and grants office, and that's their day job, and they know the system backwards and forwards. But you have the incidental user, that faculty member who rarely gets a grant, but now she got a grant, and so we don't want this to look crazy to her that she could get through it without having to, phone the help desk. So a few examples of how this is actually going to come about. Here we go. If we want this to work on multiple devices, as you know, not everybody's working on the same things anymore. So there you can see Kuali People Management for the Enterprise, Kuali COEAS, KFS, the financial system, back to COEAS on an iPad, using responsive design so that the size of the screen just adapts to whatever the device is. You've seen this in modern websites today. You see a common look and feel. And so this is what we were talking about when we mean portfolio-ness. Now, let's be clear. That means to the librarians, you need to work with us here. Don't just run off and do your own thing in your own direction. And to the financial people and to the research administration people. So there's a little bit of trade-off amongst the projects as we start to think about this, but it also means each project doesn't have to pay separately to move its user experience forward. We're getting the economies of scale out of doing that. So that's one example, is the UX side. And finally, one of the things that we're working on this year is working with our procurement or our purchasing agents. We're helping them understand how to buy free software. And this has been a long journey. Okay. Now, I say that slightly in jest, but in many procurement offices, the rule of how you do everything is a tender. It's an RFP. And so, like the Kuali Foundation, we will get in the mail or by email an RFP solicitation that's 117 pages long for us to go fill out. And we go, we don't do that. We're not your vendor. And how the commercial firms can fill that out for you. But they go, well, we can't use Kuali if you don't bid. And you can't bid unless you fill out all of this paperwork. And you go, I don't want to spend the other university's money taking it out of their mission to put it into your process so you can download our software without cost. One of us isn't paying attention here. So we've had to work through that, and this has been really important. I'll share a quick example because my procurement officer, Jill Shunk, she is fantastic. She asked me to come and speak to the U.S. the Purchasing Agents Conference. And so with no warning to her, they'd introduced me, and I asked Jill to come back up on stage. And she's looking at me, a little white face, like, what's going on? And I said, well, Jill, it's the month of March, and I know, IU in basketball, we had already, it was a tragic end last year, but we're always looking to next season. And I said, so I know as the purchasing agent, you've given great thought. How did you run the bidding process for where the Indiana Hoosiers basketball team would play next season? Have you secured a facility yet? And she's really looking confused at me. And I go, well, I know that's really important because, when basketball season, not far away, you tend to plan well. Did you get bids? Did you have a proposal? And I'm just torturing her over the matter. So finally she says to me, she said, Brad, we own Assembly Hall. We own our basketball facility, and we've been playing there for 30 years. And I say, oh, if you already own it, you don't have to bid on it. Is that the point? Yeah. Kuali software, you already own it. You don't have to bid on it and go to tender. And that's been the discussion we've had to work through with the procurement officers because we've become so trapped in the last decade of competing for these big contracts. Now, if you want to go to bid for different firms to help you install it or do migration, you can do that if you wish. So we have a decade across multiple projects, building things ourselves, sourcing them to companies. Kuali COEAS was a merger. COEAS was a community out of MIT for research administration. I said it was not like merging two firms. It was more like merging the Catholic and the Pentecostal church or something to bring them together, but we were able to do so. We've just learned so much together. And I think that is what really makes our future bright. So let me leave with a few closing slides to drive home some tutorial points. James Hilton, one of my closest colleagues, he's was the Chief Information Officer at the University of Virginia. He's now the Dean of Libraries at the University of Michigan. We consolidated some of those lessons into a piece we call the Marketecture of Community. And we call it the Marketecture because ideas rise to the top in a marketplace of ideas. But without some architecture to hold them together, in many cases, they're just ideas, and they don't go anywhere. So if we really want to come at this together and try to make colleges and university, the overhead of it costs less, what might that look like? So it really comes down to what you see in the bottom corner of how will we resolve conflicts. And you say, conflicts? If a commercial firm is providing me software and it's a great value and I'm happy to pay them because it's a good exchange, we really have no conflict. And if I need some new features and they go, you're right, we will have those new features in 3 months and it all works, we have no conflicts. But in many cases, we often find that we do have conflicts. Sometimes I have conflicts with my airline and how they provide services or cancel my flights or do things. And when those conflicts happen, almost always they are resolved in the interest of the airline, not me. Their plane, their rules, right? That's how it goes. So when we look at how you resolve conflicts, there's really two tools. There is authority and influence. So in influence, I can try to persuade you. I may have lots of influence with you, and it may go swimmingly well, and we don't really ever have a problem. Or it could be that we just simply disagree. And in the end, somebody has the authority to impose their will on the others. I did not want to pay more for using my ERP just because the economy went south, my state budget went south, and students, when jobs weren't there, they came into the university. But that caused me to have to pay more. I could not resolve that conflict other than writing a check. So let's look at this a little bit more. So the marketplace is one means of authority, and in that, this is what we have been doing for decades. One university, one contract. We don't own the software, so it's their rules. They own the software. We have very modest influence. Indiana University with 118,000 students. I can scream and hold my breath and turn red. And I am told, I don't know the fact on this, but I am told the entire sum of the higher education market in the United States is less than 1% of Oracle's business. So me turning red, you understand it. They're a business. They got a lot of other things to tend to. I have very low influence and I have no authority. So the ability to resolve conflicts is not in my favor. We can try to increase our influence by forming a buying club. So in the United States, in the Midwest, we have our athletic alliances, the Big Ten universities, or Internet 2, our national network provider, has created something called Net Plus services. So I mentioned the Box.com contract for personal storage. Maybe you use Dropbox or using SkyDrive and things like that. Instead of IU trying to negotiate with this big provider, Internet 2 negotiated on all of our behalf. And so we got a better deal. We have higher influence, but we don't own anything. If Box wants to change the terms of service, their software, their rules, they can do so. Now on the other side, we can talk about things that we own in software, and open source has a wonderful tradition. Linux, long thought to just be a toy, is in every data center now. It completely won out over many of the other solutions that were out there. In Linux, I would bet everyone in the room runs Apache for a web server. So open source has really been remarkable. But notice with open source, it's severable property. You can walk away. I can own it just as much as you can. The license allows me to have it and do things with it that are wonderful. But if I want changes in Apache, if I want changes in Linux, my ability to influence that community is quite modest. There are some people who really have strong influence in that community, but one university, we don't have much influence there at all. So the way we've been building Kuali is in this fourth quadrant, and that is a very collaborative community. Notice the distinction between cooperative and collaborative. James Hilton, again, makes the distinction that I can agree to cooperate with you for a long time. Cooperation is relatively simple. You don't hurt me, and I won't hurt you, and we're good. And we can sustain cooperation for a long time because there's really not much interdependence. But collaboration, I am interdependent with you, and you are interdependent with me. And that takes more energy to sustain for periods of time. And so the notion of collaborative community is you make investments there. So I buy in and I have higher influence to resolve conflicts. And if I fail there and it's something hugely important to me, I have severable property. I have walk-away rights because I own that software as well. But remember our tension that holds us together? It's economically better for me to stay with you and work through that than to walk away. But if someone becomes abusive or the rules get very bad, I could walk away. So HathiTrust, if you don't know about it, it's where we now have 13 million digitized volumes of books, 13 million, of which 3.5 million are fully in the public domain. Hathi, we understand, is the Hindi word for elephant. And so what a great name for a big digital library for the world. So authority and influence are the tools to resolve conflicts. And we believe that our community, by design, we want to maximize the ability for both influence and authority to resolve conflicts. And being a good academic, I have to draw on a cumulative scholarly tradition and say in 2009, 2 Nobel Prizes in economics, or the prize was shared with Eleanor Ostrom, a professor at Indiana University, who arrived there as a trailing spouse because her husband had received a position, but she's the one who won the Nobel Prize. She spent her entire life disproving the tragedy of the commons, saying that common ground, common grasses couldn't be managed by a community because everybody would try to put more sheep on the grass and eat it up until it was all gone. The communities could manage a commons apart from corporate ownership or apart from government regulation. And she proved this over and over in 40 years of her research and life. And my hero, Oliver Williamson at Berkeley, did research in saying, what should you do inside of your company and own it, or what should you go to the marketplace and buy? Should Federal Express own their airplanes, or should they lease their airplanes from someone else? And it's a brilliant study. And so this is a really apropos question to universities. Should we be building and maintaining our own software, or should we go to the commercial marketplace and buy it? Just last week, an article came out that AT&T is looking to move away from buying networking gear from Cisco. And the point was, they are imitating what Google and Facebook are already doing. Google and Facebook build a lot of their own networking gear. And you might say, why does a social media site or a search engine company build boxes of network gear that they can buy on the open market? It's simple. Google wants to put its money in its mission, not in expensive networking gear. And because you can buy white box networking gear and boards and just put open source software for networking, called software-defined networking on them, it makes their data centers cost less. You get the point? Universities should be wise like these firms. So we'll end with this. Some of you recall the famous 1984 commercial that introduced the Macintosh. And if you've never seen it, it's brilliant to see. It takes a scene out of George Orwell's 1984 movie, and perhaps with some of the spying news of this recent year, we're increasingly worried about 1984. But it shows people sitting there mindlessly watching the talking head, and the system had become the status quo. That's how everyone did things. That's how everything worked. And then our young heroine comes running in with a sledgehammer and slings it through the stage to break the screen and wake everyone up. and this was the introduction of Apple's Macintosh. So for Kuali, may 2014 not be like 2004 in the cost of running your university. Keep your money in your mission. Thank you.
Testing. Can I tap the microphone, please? Thank you, Brad, for Kuali 101. I'm sure that many of us will pass if we were to do an assessment on Kuali 101. I made a few notes. Surely, I think if I were to be challenged on an exam, I think I would probably pass it. But let me try and to emphasize the points that really struck me. And I think the one was my money, your money. I think that conflict between vendor and client, we've experienced it at my university, and I think the fact of value and collaboration and sharing, this is something we've done in South Africa previously. I think between 3 of the universities, we've tried sharing of code, community code, University of Northwest, Stellenbosch University in Pretoria, and we were successful for a large number of years, and we're still using that code at Stellenbosch University. I think the one that you also mentioned and which we learned as well is that community software is not free. There's a cost associated with it. The only difference is you've got control over that cost. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, the message that came through very strongly in your presentation. And I think those concepts of the value of contribution, and the other one point that came out, you said that he who brings the gold, steer the direction. And I think this is what is very critical in collaboration as well. And I think we as audit community of IT directors, we're learning in the process that with 1 million rand, you can't do much. But if you've got 10 institutions together with 10 million rand, you can do a lot. And I think this is being emphasized in your talk as well, that collaboration and that last matrix where collaboration is in that magic quadrant of influence and authority. That's where we all want to be, I think, in terms of being able to control our destiny. And thank you very much for communicating that in your environment, in your presentation. We're going to break for refreshments now. But before we break, I just want to emphasize what Barry has said for attending conferences. Don't go and network with your own people when you're out there having a refreshments. Try and meet a number of guys, because this is what it's all about. It's about networking, it's about collaboration, and we must use the opportunities of such events to meet one another and to learn from one another. Thank you for your willingness to be brave, to introduce yourself to some of the other guys that you see at the event, and we wish that we will all learn through that. Okay, after the refreshment break, if we can come back at 10:30, then Barry is going to challenge us with a few strategic thoughts. Thank you, Barry. We look forward to that. Thank you. Okay.